Al, I've been called a lot of things. Socially unacceptable is not one. My name is Joe Annis Hansel, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I'm glad that the people that invited me here took the time and said, why don't you come on over and share your story, because I don't often get to be by myself. I'm either at work around people, or I'm at home with the wife and kids, or I'm working with drunks, and it's rare that I get to be by myself. And I had the opportunity to drive up here a couple hours from Cincinnati and just reflect on my life. And as I drove by, I stopped at Hardee's and got something to eat in Batesville, and I go, oh, there's a hospital I detoxed in one time. And I passed Greenfield, and I thought, oh, I went to some AA meetings there. And then I got here, and I saw Bob D. and his wife, and I remember them from 1983. And it's interesting, all the people that's had their hand out to a guy like me. Yes, I am socially unacceptable from time to time. I was thinking of the speakers. I thoroughly enjoyed Hal. You know, I tell you what, here's a guy, 63, who got sober when he was 63. He's 70, and he's happy. And you know what? I was happy for him. I was so happy for him, I was almost ready to cry. I thought, man, isn't that neat? I thoroughly enjoyed your story, Hal. And Hal, you know, Hal was socially acceptable, I guess you could say. He was in upper management at one of your larger automobile manufacturers. The guy tonight, his profession, he's a priest. That's a respected profession. The gal that's going to talk after me was a professional in the mental health field for a lot of years. That's a respected profession. Me, I just boil water. If it's any consolation, I boil a lot of it. I work for a local automobile manufacturer, and I work back in the powerhouse. I'm a boiler man. And I don't really make a whole lot of money. I'm not well educated by society's standards. I finished the 10th grade of high school. I got sick from alcoholism, and I backed into a GED in the United States Navy running from the law. I live in a neighborhood, and all the little homes look like they've been cut out of cookie cutters. They all look the same. I'm not well known. I'm your average Joe, I guess you could say. And for you guys and gals in your first year of sobriety, I want to share something with you right up front. I've been sober since October the 5th, 1978, and I'm living proof that it's possible to stay sober over 18 years and be happy and comfortable with yourself most of the time and not really amount to a goddamn thing. There seems to be an undercurrent of an idea in AA that in order to be sober, you have to be successful. And I'm just trying to be happy and unsociable. Trying to maintain the status quo for us winos. I'm going to talk about two things this afternoon. There are two spiritual axioms that are common to every alcoholic I've ever known, and that's peeing and puking. And it's something all alcoholics can identify. Don't act shocked. We're at Alcoholics Anonymous, honey. I see her went, oh my, you could tell her she was kind of shocked. No, I did a lot of that along with my drinking. I'm an alcoholic. We're glad you could make it. Come on in. I find it interesting. You know, most alcoholics that I've heard, and I did it myself when I first got sober, they always want to tell you what those other people did to them. You know, how they screwed me over, and they did this to me, and society did this to me. Hopefully, within the hour that I've got to share with you, I'm going to tell you, as an alcoholic, what I did to the people that I loved. That's what AA has taught me to do, is I'm going to tell you what I did to my mother, and my father, and my brother, not what they did to me. I'm an alcoholic, and I have the illness of alcoholism. And I think in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of people who've been confused on what alcoholism is. They think that anybody that does anything is alcoholism, and they think alcoholism is addiction. And that's not necessarily true, not at all. When I smoke Marlboro, I smoke 2 packs a day, every day. That's a hell of an addiction. And my body demands 2 packs every day. 5 cigarettes one way or the other every day. That's addiction. And I've never gone home to my wife and said, Vanessa, I don't know what the hell happened to me today. I started to smoke my regular 2 packs of cigarettes and I ended up smoking 5 packs of Marlboro. Just lost all control. Never did that. But I've done that with alcohol. I've set out to drink an 8-pack of beer or a 12-pack of beer and lose all control. Be on the 17th going, I thought I was only going to have 9. You see? So I've come to find out all this stuff's not the same. And you don't have to believe me. I go look for yourself. I heard the Indiana Indians had their first game in their new stadium. Did they open a new stadium for these guys down there? Go down there and look and you see if you see any crack addicts between home and first base. Can you see a crack addict hitting a crack pipe behind the dugout and somebody gets a hit and they all start clapping going, yay! And they're going, shh, God, there's too many people in here clapping. I don't see that. I don't see any heroin addicts up in the red seats nodding out. But by God, I'll bet you go down there and sooner or later you're going to see an alcoholic who's down there between home and first or between home and third. And they're going to be able to tell you the batting average of that guy that's in the box, the ERA of the pitcher, the bad call that the ump made the last inning. By God, he's in the game. And that's what alcohol did for me. I'm an alcoholic. Alcohol put me in the game. And if alcohol don't put you in the game, maybe you're not an alcoholic. Maybe. It's the only way you know is find out is drink. I'm for drinking. My mother and father are alcoholic. And my mother's been sober almost 26 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. We used to think she was crazy. We did. We thought she was nuts. My brother's been sober 12 and a half years in the Ohio State Penitentiary. Yeah, everybody's got to get it their way. And by God, he got it his way. My father's 73 years old, 72, 73 years old, and he's never found recovery. And we all weren't sick at the same time. We got sick separately. We kind of joined in as time went by. And I remember as a young kid, it was a nice place to grow up. We lived in a suburb of Cincinnati called North College Hill. And we lived in a little 2-bedroom house. And life was good. We lived on a dead-end street. Years ago, they used to call them dead-end streets. Now they call them cul-de-sacs. It's still a dead-end street to me. We could sit out. We were the 4th house from the end of the street, and we could sit there in the middle of the street at 9 o'clock at night, and nobody'd bother you. And if there was a strange car on the street, you knew it was a strange car because it didn't belong to anybody that lived there. You know, people watched out for each other. You could leave your doors open. It was a really nice place to live. I could not have picked a better place to grow up as a kid if I had my choice. And as I got older, I got an opportunity to be involved in activities growing up as a kid, you know, just regular stuff, baseball and stuff like that. And my mother's alcoholism started to take off, I guess, when I was 10 or 11 years old. Now, my mother's about 5'4", and her alcoholism made her blow up to about 190 pounds. She was always drinking quarts of beer and eating Black Mollies. She didn't like speed, but doctors prescribed speed for women in the 50s and 60s for everything from weight loss to toxemia to whatever. They would give them Dexedrine or something like that. And she'd have that nervous look to her all the time, that drunk, nervous look. You know what I mean? She had that fat hanging from under her arms, and she was like this all the time. And I grew up in an era where my father had the only car. My mother never learned to drive until she was 43 when she got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And So we would walk to the pony keg as kids with my mother, and she would get a pound of bologna, a pound of cheese, a loaf of bread, and 8 quarts of beer. And they had these carts. Remember, they had these little carts with the wheels on them, and you could hear those empties clanging. You could hear them going up the street. And I would see one of my buddies as a kid growing up, and I could see him coming up the street, and I would be with my mother. And my mother embarrassed me as a kid. Now, I didn't know this until I got sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, Don. The thing that I saw in my mother that embarrassed me was alcoholism. I could never figure out how can I love somebody so much and yet be so embarrassed by their behavior. Well, I would act like that wasn't my mother. I'd walk across the street and I don't know who that is. And then when they'd pass by, I'd go back and walk with my mother home. We thought she was crazy. I remember I was about 12. My father took me and my brother out in the backyard. He says, you know, if it wasn't for you two boys, I'd be long gone. Your mother's nuts. And it appeared to us that she was nuts. Because, you see, she had a mother that lived in Longview, a state mental institution, for 40 years. And she died in that institution at 64 years old from ovarian cancer. She was in there for alcoholism. That's the way they treated alcoholism, with pills. They just kept her so doped up she couldn't even talk. And we would go out to visit Grandma. And mother looked like Grandma when she drank. She'd sit there and babble and spit running down her and everything else. And it appeared to us that Mom was crazy like her mother in a state mental institution. So Dad was right. She was crazy. That's what it appeared to us to be. And see, Dad did his drinking away from home. Dad did his drinking in the local bars. And I could always tell when my father was drunk, he'd speed up the driveway. You know, and if he was too drunk, he kind of went in bed and waited to see if he was in a good mood or a bad mood. And then my drinking started to pick up. I started to use drugs when I was 13 years old because it was the 60s. Not because I'm alcoholic, it was the 60s. It seemed like everybody was trying that stuff. If I remember the hairstyle was long, straight hair. And you can tell I was socially unacceptable then. And then Jimi Hendrix came out and I was cool. I had curly hair and it seemed like if you had a bag of marijuana and you belonged to some kind of movement or cause, you were cool. And heaven knows a 13-year-old boy like me wanted to be cool. I had joined the Boy Scouts when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And by the time I was 14, a little over 14 years old, I'd become an Eagle Scout. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was a confident young boy. This is before I became alcoholic, or before I started to drink alcoholically. All the boys in the Cincinnati area, they had sponsors who became Eagle Scout that year. And mine was President Langston, University of Cincinnati. And he called me in his office about a week before the ceremony. He says, Joe, he says, you keep getting A's like you're getting in school, and we'll make sure you get a college education. Here's my number and my card at home. You call me. You turn 16, 17 years old. I want you to call me and we'll discuss this further. He was willing to make sure I had a college education. The guy who presented all these boys this Eagle Scout Award was General Westmoreland, Time Magazine's Man of the Year. And I remember him after the ceremony saying, I like young men like you in my army. Would you ever think about going to West Point? You know, 14-year-old boy, I didn't even know what West Point was. I thought it was like Palm Beach in Florida. I didn't know what it was. And he says, I like young men like you in my army. This is my card, but I want you to get a hold of this guy. If you keep getting good grades like this fella says that you're getting, I want you to take this test. And I didn't know till later that you need a reference from a senator or a congressman or someone of that nature to get in. I thought, well, hell, general's good. Let's go for the top, you know. And what I'm trying to say is I had people at that time in my life that were willing to give me an education, an opportunity to get one, or to give me an opportunity as an officer in the military. I was a confident young man. There weren't any problems in my life. There were only obstacles to go over, around, under, or through. And if this doesn't work, we'll go try plan B. Don't panic. We'll straighten this out. By the time I was 23 years old, I was sober 2 months, and I'm sitting in a local restaurant after an AA meeting, and I had to have somebody tell me that I made enough money to buy a car. I said, really? I make enough money to buy a car? You're not kidding me, are you? I mean, you're not trying to make a joke out of me in front of all these people. I mean, really? I make enough money to buy a car? I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. I didn't know if you were telling me the truth. I didn't know what was real and what was not real. At 13 years old, I started smoking that pot. I've done every drug you can think of. And the reason I tell you this is there's a chapter in here for goofballs like me in this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's called More About Alcoholism. And it says, guys like me, the alcoholic, through every form of self-deception and experimentation, will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. I would have done anything to keep from being an alcoholic. Alcoholic was that person, that mother I saw. It was the father that left home. That was alcoholism. I'll never be like that. I'll die before I'm like that. So what was I doing? I was taking drugs to try to prove I wasn't going to be an alcoholic. Now that's interesting. I go to a maximum security prison every Monday night to an AA meeting, and I have yet to meet a social drinker in there trying to prove he's an alcoholic. It's always the alcoholic trying to prove he's not an alcoholic. And that's how crazy and sick I was at 13 years old. I was out to prove I'm not going to be like you. At least this is not what you're doing. This is better than what you're doing. I had a guy, I was 14 years old. He says, try this LSD. It'll give you a better understanding of yourself and the world that you live in. Wow, that sounds appealing. It sounds mature and exotic. And I tried it, and about 400 trips later, I didn't understand myself or the world I lived in any better than the first trip. But it was the 60s. It seemed like the right thing to do. All the older guys were doing that kind of stuff. And then there was a group over here called the Juicers. I remember them. And anything that had to do with society's standard, what did they used to call it? The establishment. The Juicers did that. The establishment drank. So nobody wanted to do anything like that. And little by little, though, secretly, we were doing that in the alleys. We're starting to crack quarts of beer in the alleys. I remember at 13 years old, the first time I got drunk, I drank 3 bottles of Schaenling beer. And I was sitting with a guy I didn't even like up till that time. And after I drank those 3 bottles of Schaenling, he was my best friend, and we were making plans for next Friday. I mean, it had a profound effect on me almost immediately, and I couldn't see it at the time. It made me feel good. Made me feel real good. But I had this problem. I started getting in a lot of trouble. I went from Eagle Scout to hanging around with convicted felons real fast. And my drinking progressed. The drug usage progressed. And I ended up running away from home at 16 years old. My dad had stopped coming home. I started getting in more trouble. I went from an opportunity to go to college for free, to go to the military, and here I am in Georgia for hitchhiking, in jail for hitchhiking at 16 years old. This is 1971. My hair's out to here. I had one of them big afros, the kind where you turn your head and the hair catches up to it. And I'd seen that movie Deliverance. And these guys that stopped us looked like they were from that movie in Deliverance. Sheriff, he looked at me and he said, "You white or black, boy? What you doing down here, Yankee? That'll make your rectum tighten up. I'll tell you that right now." I thought, he's really saying that to me. I'm 16 years old. I thought, this is like the movie. He's really saying that to me. I mean, what do you say to something like that? I've never had anybody ask me that before. Are you white or black? Or what are you doing down here, Yankee? I mean, there's no answer for that. And they threw us in jail, and they wanted to know if we were doing any drugs or anything like that. And it's hard to explain to the police chief in a foreign state that you're running away from home because you're scared. But I end up going back home after a few weeks, and then I'd get mad and I'd run away to Florida. And I remember being in a Hallelujah house one time in Naples, Florida, 1972. And I think I'd turned 17 years old. And I'm standing on a street corner beating a tambourine thinking, Jesus Christ, when are we going to eat? I'm hungry. What am I doing here? I could not justify or rationalize my behavior to myself. I couldn't explain to you why I was doing what I was doing. It didn't make any sense to me. I was leaving home in February with 9 cents in my pocket with no coat because I had a bad day and disagreed with my mother. I mean, they didn't teach you that kind of stuff in the Boy Scouts. That is not being prepared. That is stupid. That is sick. But here I was doing that. Here I am doing things that totally contradict everything I was ever taught to be right from wrong, good or bad, you know? And I started to get in a lot of trouble. And without going into a lot of detail, I was given a choice by the law. You either go to prison or you go into the military. And I've been to jail. I thought, I think I'll go into the Navy. And I joined the Navy with the idea that I'm going to start my life over again. I'm going to just wipe the slate clean. I'm going to go where nobody knows me. I'm going to start over again. And I got over to the Philippine Islands. I was 17 years old. And it was like a carnival. Longapo City was like a carnival. There were women there that I only read about in books. There was booze that just flowed freely, and I went, I have died and went to heaven. I mean, I'm 17 years old. I'd have had relations with a gym shoe. Come on, fellas. I thought I died and went to heaven. I thought, this goes on all night? I mean, I'm 17. I didn't know anything. And my ship finally came in, and we got on the ship, and I remember seeing the islands go out of sight, and I went, oh, what did I do? Land's gone, and it stayed gone for weeks. And losers like me, they put down in the boiler room because that's where they needed people at that time. And I told a guy down there, I says, I think I made a bad mistake getting in this Navy. I think I'm going to get out. He says, you can't. Tell an alcoholic they can't. My mind says, you watch me. And they have something in the Navy called a Buper's Manual. It's a manual of all the rules and regulations. I thought, I'll find something to get out on this. Drug addiction? Nah, can't get a job if you get out with that. You know, and I'm looking through all these, and I thought, flat feet. Yeah, I think I can pull that one off. And you know what? That's when I got discharged out of the Navy from flat feet. I have weird-looking feet, and I played it for everything that it's worth. And I got out. Now, I can't tell you why I'm doing this. I mean, one minute I'm 17 years old in the Philippine Islands. I'm going to start over new. And the next minute, the bus drives away. I'm 19 years old, and I'm in downtown Cincinnati going to go back and live with Mom. I want to go home and help my mother. I'm going to get a job and help Mom. Yeah. I wanted to. And I would borrow her car for days on end to do that. But I would forget to go look for the job once I started to drink. I ruined relationships with people that I had, women that I had. I had opportunities for jobs, good jobs. But the alcohol was calling the shot in my life. I had become alcoholic somewhere along the line. The booze started calling all the shots. I wasn't calling the shots in my life for a while. And my drinking had progressed to the point where I was going home at 3 and 4 in the morning. And this is how I treat the people that I love when I'm drinking. My mother was sober 5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think. And I'm coming home at 3 and 4 in the morning drunk. Me and my brother are both coming home drunk, 3 and 4 in the morning. I'm violent by this time. Drinking made me violent and unpredictable. I could be sitting there and all of a sudden just get up and be mad at the world, put my fist right through the wall, or knock a door straight through the frame off its hinges, or get up and throw a lamp and smash it. Or I remember one night standing towering over my mother. Now I'm 6'2" and she's 5'4". She's a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years, and I'm towering over her and I'm screaming at her in her own kitchen about 3:30 in the morning, drunk at the top of my lungs, calling her an MFer and all those other things I was never taught to call my mother. And as I was saying those things to my mother, my mind says, "What did you say that for?" But I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't stop it. There was no way I ever wanted to talk to my mother like that, ever. The booze was calling the shots in my life. That's how I treat my mother when I drink. And it got to the point where she said, "Joe, I can't live like this anymore. I love you, but I'm not going to partake in your suicide. If you're going to die, you're going to do it outside of this house. I can't do it. I don't want to live like this anymore. It's tearing me up. The phone rings at 2 or 3 in the morning. I think you're in jail again. I hear the sirens go by. I think, oh, God, there it is again. He's been in a wreck." She says, everything's just so unpredictable. I can't live like this. I can't be at peace in my own home. She said, "Joe, you have a problem with your drinking." And I'd say, "You're crazy. You think everybody that has drinks has a problem with their drinking. Just because you're an alcoholic and a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you think anybody that has a bud once in a while is an alcoholic. Get the hell away from me. You're crazy." She says, "Well, I can understand how you feel, but you're going to have to leave tomorrow. You and your brother get out." And I says, "Well, can you give us a week?" She says, "No, you get out tomorrow." I'd like to share something with you. There are 2 things in my life that my mother has done for me. And I believe, as far as a mother to a son, it was the most important things that she was supposed to do for me in her lifetime as a mother. And one was kick me out. Because you see, when she kicked me out, when she stopped helping me, she started helping me. You see, by allowing me to live there, she was teaching me to live off a woman and become dependent on somebody else and not responsible for my own actions. And the second greatest thing she ever did for me is she introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't to clean behind my ears or change my underwear in case I was in an accident or to be polite to people. No, it was to kick me out so I could hit bottom, so I could reach back up to grab for help to a group of people that were practically strangers to teach me how to live. And the next day, I threw all my belongings in 3 green hefty trash can liners, colors, whites, and miscellaneous. And I headed for No Hope, Kentucky on 15th and Scott in Covington. And I had a sleeping room down there, and most alcoholics like me who drank like me know what I'm talking about. The room was green. The whole damn room's green. The windows busted out. I had plastic curtains with grease on the blinds. I had a bare mattress on the floor for a bed, and a cardboard box turned upside down for an end table. I had a light that hung by a wire from the ceiling. Hal, you said you raised ducks. I raised roaches. It was to keep the unwanted humans away. I didn't have a bathroom. Everybody in the building used the same bathtub and bathroom on the second floor. There were 10 of us that lived there. I was the only guy under 65. I'm 21 years old living on Skid Row. And you know what I thought when I walked in at night? I'd hit that light, those roaches would take off. It was like you were at the roach races or something. There was never any food in there. I had a sink. I didn't have a bathroom in there. So you know what I used the sink floor. I'd lay down on that mattress and I'd watch stuff spin around. I'd look at that damn light hanging on the ceiling, and that breeze would tatter that plastic curtain back and forth. You know what I thought? This is fantastic. Nobody to complain about my drinking. The last time I got like this, all I heard was, "You've been drinking too much again, haven't you? I told you not to come home drinking." I says, "I don't have to listen to that crap anymore. I can just lay here and just get as wiped out as I want. This is fantastic." God. And Skid Row is a physical area. It's no big deal. There's a guy, Jack S. in Louisville, says he took his Skid Row, and a lot of people take their Skid Rows and drag them through the living rooms of their homes so their wives and their kids can see it. that I was one of the lucky ones. I was down there by myself. And Skid Row is just an area. You get used to the bus fumes, the pop and cap sound of a gun, the broken glass, the garbage. You get used to all that. What I couldn't get used to was the hopelessness on the inside of me. I couldn't shake that. The booze wouldn't take it away anymore. You see, I kept looking back at that. I was the kid that was going to go places. I was the kid that the little old ladies would talk about when he walked out of the church from lighting the candles at the end of the service. Oh, that Joe, he's such a nice boy. He's going to be somebody one day. I could hear people say things about those things about me, and that's what was going through my mind. And here I am on Skid Row. And a typical day for me was getting up. I lost the ability to work. I turned 22 years old. And I remember getting up and getting a bottle of Wild Irish Rose or a pint of MD and drinking that. And I'd stand with my face pressed up against a chain link fence of a schoolyard about so many blocks up the street from there. It was a parochial school. It was like 9:15 in the morning, and they're all little 8 and 9-year-old kids playing out there. I'd be drunk and I'd wet myself, and I got my face up against the fence watching these kids thinking, I'd give anything to be a kid again. I'd give anything to go home to my mom and say, Jesus, Mom, I didn't mean to turn out to be like this. Give me another chance, just one more time. Let me back in. But I knew I wasn't going to be going home to my mother, and I knew I wasn't going to be a little kid anymore, that what I was going to do is go back up the street and get me another bottle of wine. That was the daily existence for me. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I hear people talk about denial in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm here to tell you denial's not even an AA term. But our book does talk about delusion a few times. And that's what I was living in, was a delusion, thinking that my life was normal, that alcohol was not the problem. I remember January the 18th, 1977, hitchhiking back from North College Hill. It was 70 below that night, and it was 25 below, the wind chill factor 70 below. I have no hat on, no gloves, a navy pea coat on, bib overall, socks, and shoes, and nobody wanted to be around me anymore. They said, man, watch him. He can flip out on you at any time. He's a nut. And so I walked from that bar about 1.5 miles, and then somebody picked me up. And the next thing I remember, it's about 3:45 in the morning, and I'm downtown. The river's frozen. That's the year they drove cars over the Ohio River. And I'm in the middle of the bridge next to the Reds Stadium, and the wind is howling. And if you just stopped me in the middle of that bridge and said, Joe, do you think you might have a problem with your drinking? I said, well, hell no, I don't have a problem with my drinking. I've got a transportation problem. I've got 30 cents, but the buses aren't running. And believed that. Believed it. That's delusion, a life based on false beliefs that cannot be shaken by the truth or facts. And while you're at it on this bridge at 3:45 with me, questioning my drinking, let me tell you what my problem is. My problem is that mother that kicked me out. If she wouldn't have got sober in AA, my parents wouldn't have got divorced, I'd be a college graduate by now. That's my problem. It's the Navy that kicked me out. It's the boss that fired me. It's the girlfriend that dumped me. It's the truck they towed away. But it can't be the alcohol. I remember being at high school dances, freshman dance, 15 years old. Wanting to ask those girls to dance. Couldn't do it. I was afraid. I couldn't say, would you like to dance? Hell, I had a couple drinks. I danced with the guys. I didn't care anymore. You know what I mean? And anything that takes fear away from you and makes you feel that good surely can't be the problem. So you have to know what your problem is in order to deny it. And I'm here to tell you, I didn't know what my problem was. I did not have the slightest. I came to AA for the first time 20 years ago. This past Thursday, I was 22 years old. I had a spiritual awakening. And without going into it, or take up too much time, of all the people I called for help, it was my mother. And I called her at the AA clubhouse because that's where she was working. She was working a minimum wage job, trying to make ends meet. And I called her. I says, Mom, this is Joe. She says, what do you want? See, she had gotten a restraining order on me. I wasn't allowed within 100 feet of the house or I'd be arrested. And she changed all the locks and everything. And I'm calling her up and she said, what do you want? I said, how do you stay sober? And she started crying and I could hear her in the background going, oh my God, he's one of us. I said, Mom, I'm out here on the street. Let me run this by you one more time. How do you stay sober? And she says, here, talk to this guy. And she put me on the phone with a guy. And he says, do you think you might have a problem with your drinking? I says, well, I don't know. I might. I had a spiritual awakening. My mind was as clear then as it is right now. I just wasn't armed with the facts about myself. Boom. Well, hell, I didn't know really what my problem was. He says, why don't you come on down tonight to the meeting? And I says, look, man, I feel like I've just been on a merry-go-round going 90 miles an hour the last 10 years of my life, and it's just stopped. I'm going to go back across the street to my room, and I'm going to go upstairs to the community bathtub, take a bath, and go to bed. I'll be down tomorrow. And I went to my first meeting the next day on April the 10th, 1977. I didn't really know what to expect. It was getting warm out. I had no underwear, no socks, no shirt. I had bib overalls on with shoes. Funny now, it wasn't funny then at all. And I knew when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous that the people were going to say, man, why don't you get a haircut? Why don't you get a job? Why don't you get some clothes, man? Look at you. And why don't you take a bath? That last one was null and void. Man, you stink bad, man. Because, see, I had told myself those things over the sink. Every morning that I woke up, I would get up day in and day out and look at myself and say, look at you, Joe, you're a mess. When are you going to get a haircut? Look at you. When are you going to get a job? Why can't you go out there and take care of yourself like other people? You're a mess. Look at you. Get some clothes, man. Look at you. You're a mess. So I just figured that's what those people were going to tell me. And at that time in Cincinnati, there weren't a lot of young people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Most of them were old enough to be my parents and my grandparents. And I thought, my God, what are we doing Friday night? Little polka, bridge, maybe? I don't know. When you're 22, everybody's old. You know, and a guy came up to me at the door of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I guess he was 50 or 55, and he was an engineer, and he says, come on in, it's good to have you. Why don't you come on over and have a cup of coffee with us? And he says, Joe, we don't know if you're an alcoholic like we are, but if you are, you're in the grips of a progressive, fatal, and incurable illness. Never gets any better without spiritual relief. And I'm thinking, that might be true for you, you old fart. You drank 30 years. And then there's another woman. She was old. Oh, God, she was old. She was 40. She was old. Old. When you're 22, 40 is old. Oh, my. I'm 42. 50 seems mild. Rather mild. But she was 40. And she was a housewife. And she came over and says, Joe, if you want to find a way up and out of your problems, we'll share with you how we did it. They didn't say, we'll tell you what to do. My goodness, if you'd have tried to tell me what to do, I wouldn't hear you anymore. I'm spiritually dyslexic. When somebody tells, my hearing goes off. I see the lips moving, but I don't hear any words coming out anymore. But you talk about yourself and say, well, this has been my experience. This is what happened to me. I go, fascinating. Tell me more. You've got my undivided attention. And I heard a guy give us a lead or tell a story like I'm doing now. And he just gotten a sponsor, and he thought he had accomplished such a great thing that he had to keep talking about it, oh, God, for an hour. It was unbelievable. And it's my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know what A was. I looked around, and everybody was old enough to be my parents and grandparents, and I thought, well, they're all old. They must all be sober and all have sponsors. And I was so neurotic, I thought, well, I don't want to be left out. I want one too. So I turned to the guy next to me after the meeting, and I said, would you be my sponsor? And he says, yeah. And he's been my sponsor ever since. And people ask me from time to time, how do you go about picking a sponsor? I said, just ask a member of AA. Don't make a big deal out of it. And they go, oh, he's so narrow-minded. Boy, he's a smart ass, isn't he? I'm just sharing my experience. That's what I did. Just ask somebody. And he shared with me some of the things that he did to stay sober. He said, Joe, I go to a lot of meetings. I have a sponsor I talk to on a regular basis. I have a home group. He said, I go to an institution meeting, a hospital or a jail or a psych ward at least once a week. And he says, I try to read this book called Alcoholics Anonymous and follow the directions in it the best I know how. He says, here, this is for you. You might want to try it. And I picked this book up and I looked through it and I thought, there's not one damn picture in this book. There's nobody reading any books without pictures where I'm living at. I'm on Skid Row. There's not anybody with Playboy down there. And you're giving me a book that doesn't have a picture in it? I can't remember the last line, let alone the last paragraph. And but I remember a guy saying, all you have to do is just don't drink a day at a time and go to meetings and you'll be okay. And I don't know about anybody here, but that kind of information kills alcoholics. If I had to just not drink and go to meetings, I'd be in a world of trouble. My problems start when I stop drinking. Because a few days after my mind starts clearing up, I start thinking about that bastard that screwed me 10 years ago. And when I see him, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. And I remember what my mother did to me. And before you know it, I just can't take it anymore and give me some Mad Dog. My problem started when I stopped drinking. I could always stop. My problem was I kept starting back up because I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to be happy, joyous, and free. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I used to think people like me they drank because they chose to drink, or no, my goodness. Heavy drinkers choose to drink. Social drinkers choose to drink. Alcoholics drink because they have to. I remember I was sober about a year, and this guy and I started a group at the Mount Airy Men's Shelter, and these guys were more down and out than I was on Skid Row. I mean, they don't even have a mattress. They've got to use somebody else's mattress. And there was a fellow that came up to me every week for 6 weeks after the meeting, and he said, my name's so-and-so. I used to be an executive with Procter & Gamble. I worked there 20 years. I had a $500,000 home in Indian Hill, which is a rich neighborhood in Cincinnati. This is in '79. And he says, I lost that, and I lost the affection of my wife and 3 daughters, and I'm here at the shelter. And I'd walk out of there every Monday thinking, this jerk thinks I'm supposed to believe that stuff. He must think I'm stupid. And after about 6 weeks of that, I asked the social worker, what is it with this guy over here? He keeps telling me that same story every week. She said, it's because it's true. And it just floored me because I realized, my God, I've got the same illness this man does. That this thing really is an illness. Alcoholics don't drink because they want to. They drink because they have to. It became so clear to me. My goodness, who in their right mind would work 20 years of their life to build themselves up a good reputation at a company like Procter & Gamble just to lose it because they chose to drink? Who in their right mind would give up the love and affection of their wife and children and throw away a $500,000 home to hang out with the fellows at the shelter? I got to believe that guy drank because he had to. I really believe that. And that's why I drank. I stayed around Alcoholics Anonymous about 89 days. My mind started clearing up, and I asked my sponsor, I said, I don't think I've had a problem with this marijuana stuff. What do you think about that? And he says, well, if you haven't had a problem with it, I suggest you smoke it. I thought, wow, I have a good sponsor. Well, he knew I had to be convinced for myself. And I don't know, I started smoking that stuff. I don't know what made me think I could quench my thirst with a Diet Pepsi and smoke marijuana. I've never done that. It was always whiskey or wine or something. And I came back to AA with my tail between my legs. I stayed sober 4 months the next time. Wouldn't read this book, though. No way. I'd read Psycho-Cybernetics. That's a good one, Arbutus. Think and Grow Rich. If you're new, it might be helpful to get a job. I really thought that you could just think and that money would come to you. The Power of Positive Thinking. That'll mess you up when you're trying to beat the roaches off your mattress. And after 4 months of going to a meeting every day, I drank. And I came back, stayed sober 5 months the next time. Every day went to a meeting. Chaired the 5th month. Last meeting was the last day of the month I chaired. I walked out of that meeting and I'm walking down the street and my mind says, a bottle of MD 2020 would be really good right now. And my head says, you're a big boy, go get it. And I went and got it. And I'm halfway through the bottle, I'm thinking, you're crazy. You're crazy. You've just been to meetings for 5 months. You just chaired a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you're sucking on the mad dog. You are crazy. I guess I'm one of those people that AA just doesn't work for. I'm one of those people I hear him talking about in the 5th chapter who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. And I went in and out of AA to know loneliness like only alcoholics, I believe, know loneliness. I went through the hospital for alcoholism in Batesville for 3 weeks. It was $400. It wasn't for alcoholism then. It was for gastrointestinal problems. I had gas. They would pay for gas, but they won't pay for alcoholism. A week out of there, I was drunk. I got sober on October the 5th, 1978, and I was 23 years old. I had been in and out of AA maybe 25, 30 times, and I was convinced that I was one of those people that nothing was going to get better for, and AA wasn't even going to help me. This meeting was no different than any other meeting, except this one was an eating meeting. And I was hungry, I was out of work, and no money, and I thought, I'm going to show up to this eating meeting, get some food, and act like a good AA member for an hour and get the hell out of there. Those people were really weird. Really, really weird. And I don't remember the meeting that night, but I remember the meeting in my sponsor's car after the meeting. His mother had died of leukemia. And he said, Joe, I want to thank you. You helped save my life this past year. I'm thinking, I have no underwear, no shirt. I smell like a goat. My hair's out to here. I look funny. I'm thinking really, really weird. I have no job, no money, no car. And this bastard has the audacity to say, I saved his life. And you know what I said to him? Oh, really, Mike? How's that? Tell me. He said, I wanted to drink this past year. And he says, I can't describe it. I said, I could taste whiskey in my mouth. He said, I watched my mother little by little. She shriveled up and died from the cancer and the chemotherapy and everything. And there were times, Joe, when I wanted to drink. But every time I wanted to drink, he said, I watched you drink. And I saw what it was doing to you in your life at that time. And I figured, I don't need that right now in my life. Thanks. You teach me a lot. And for the first time in a long time, I said what was on my mind. I said, you son of a bitch, I'm not teaching you anymore. I didn't come back to AA to find a way of life that would let me be happy, joyous, and free. I wanted to come back and get even with him because he was using me. When I walked away from his car, you know what I thought? I had a bad habit of thinking at people from about 10 feet. And I thought to myself as I walked away from his car, you think you're so smart. I'm going to read that dumb book that doesn't have any pictures in it. I'm going to try to do what it says to do. I'm going to go to the same meetings you go to, eat the same food you eat, tell the same stupid jokes you tell over and over and over. God. And when it doesn't work out like everything I've tried my whole life, even AA, I can turn around and say, told you so. You were wrong. I've been sober ever since then, October 5th, 1978. I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to live. And you know what? The God of my understanding knew I understood bitterness. The God of my understanding knew I understood resentment and hurt feelings and self-pity, because those are the things that he used to help me. I got to about 30 days sober. I'm trying to read this book, and in the meantime, a guy came up to me and offered me a job. I work in the projects down at Laurel Homes in Lincoln Court in Cincinnati in the boiler room. And I thought the guy was just trying to be nice to me. And I was reading the part in the book where it says, having a new employer, being all-knowing and all-powerful, he provided us with what we needed as long as we kept close to him and performed his work well. They were talking about God. I thought they were talking about this new employer. This guy gave me a new job. And I thought, this is a neat book. This is really neat. It went right over my head. I didn't understand it. After 30 days, I was ready to bolt. I was ready to run. And I had that feeling again, like, oh, I got to go. I can't stay sober. And I asked him, I said, what did you do when you felt like this? He said, I wrote all that stuff down that bothered me, Joe. Resentment, fear, and sex. I had to have somebody put labels on emotions because all I knew was I was hurt and I was angry. He said, Joe, when you think about something or someone and it makes you mad when you think about it, that's what we call resentment. He said, when you squirm thinking about something that makes you uncomfortable, that's called fear. And he says, you know what to write down about that sex life of yours. Don't leave nothing out. So I went back to my room and I thought, you need me to stay sober like you say you do. Listen to this. And I just started writing. I said, boy, wait till he hears about that buffalo from Billings, Montana. And I read all that stuff to him, and he kind of yawned, really. It didn't impress him at all. And I read all that stuff to him. I went back to my room, and I did what the book said. And I got this down, and I looked at it, and I looked at the first 5 proposals. Did I leave anything out? Is it good enough for me? My first 6 step was I completely embarrassed myself in front of another human being. How could I have told him about that buffalo? Oh, my, that was stupid. I was never going to tell anybody about that, ever. And then I asked this guy to take all of me, the good and the bad. I read that prayer out of there. And I started to make amends to the people I had on that list. And man, my life changed. It changed so fast. I didn't know what happened to me. I had to have somebody explain what was happening to me. I was sober about 2 months and I panicked. Nothing was going on. I had no place to be. My mind was quiet. Nobody was looking for me. I got nervous. I called my sponsor and I told him all that. I says, I'm bored. He said, that's peace of mind, dummy. Get used to it. I thought, boy, I'm glad somebody told me that was peace of mind. I would have thought it was boredom. I had to have somebody tell me these things I didn't know. And he taught me how to work with drunks. He taught me how to tell my story by watching him do it at jails and institutions and hospitals and psych wards. And he stressed the fact that we are always going in there not because they might be alcoholic, but we're going in there because we're alcoholic. This is going to help us. And it took a long time for that to sink in because I really thought I was going in there to help these guys. I was sober about 2 years and I got married. I learned to fly a plane. I remember flying a plane over that room I lived in on Scott Street. And I never really saw the full impact of that until years later. I was sober about 5 years, and my wife had a little baby. I used to say we had a baby. Let me tell you something. I watched it. She had the baby. I saw it. I went, oh, my God. Things will never be the same. Look at that. Jesus Christ. Oh. You know us alcoholics, always thinking of others. And we named our first boy after Mike, my sponsor, and she did it again on the same day a year later. I don't know if that's good timing or bad memory, but I said, you better knock it off. I can't, not every year on November 20th. And we named this boy Bob after my sponsor. And Bob was born with severe club feet. His feet were literally on upside down. And on that day that he was born, I find it fascinating. God orchestrates this whole thing, and we can worry all we want. But I guess if there's a theme to my talk today is that worry has never solved any problem I've ever had. It's necessary for spiritual growth, but it's never solved any problem I've ever had. I didn't really know what to think when I saw that little boy's feet like that, but I knew God put drunks in my life to help me stay sober, to help me see how good things have gotten. And on that day that boy was born, I sat in a courtroom and watched him bring my brother in, shackled to handcuffs on a waist belt and shackles on his ankles. My mother and father sitting there crying. He had been to AA before, didn't think he needed it, thought he was a drug addict. Now he's standing in front of the judge facing 5 life sentences because of drinking whiskey. And I looked at that man and I looked at me. I thought, what's the difference? The difference is I have Alcoholics Anonymous, and the power behind Alcoholics Anonymous is God, and that never runs out. And the power behind the problem he had was alcohol. It ran out. And I went back up to my wife that night, and I said, don't you worry about that little boy's feet. He's going to be fine. She says, how do you know that, Joe? I said, well, I just saw a man the day he lost the right to ever watch his kids play ball or walk his daughter down the aisle. It really doesn't matter if he walks. What matters is that I'm sober and I can kiss him on the cheek and push him in a wheelchair if that's what it takes. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be all right. And how true that was, I didn't know it, but everything has been all right. He had operations on his feet and on his legs and things, and he's an intelligent little bastard. Sometimes he's a little bit too smart. He has no coordination whatsoever, but he's a very, very intelligent boy. He's 12 years old. He's in the 6th grade, and his school level is that of like 10th and 11th grade in high school. Very, very smart kid. He'll never need his feet anyway, and God's joke on me, you know. That worrying got me to get more involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. Didn't bother the kid at all. My brother ended up getting 3 10 to 25-year sentences, and he got sober on November the 20th, which was our kids' birthdays. And I want to share this with you. You know, I used to put conditions on my happiness. I'll be happy if this happens, but I won't be happy if that happens. Never knew I was doing it. Never knew how AA was changing me to where I could be happy regardless of what happens. Well, can't be happy if you get a boy deformed. Wrong. I was happy. Can't be happy if your marriage is on the rocks. Well, at one time it was, but I was happy. About 5 years ago, he came up for parole, and they said, come back in 3 years. He came back in 3 years. They said, come back in 18 months. And last year, he went up to the parole board, and I'd come home from a meeting. I'd had back surgery. I was off from work. And he called, and I said, well, are you coming home? And he says, no, Joe. He said, they told me to come back in 13 years. And I just went cold. I thought, oh, wow. And to top it all off, my youngest boy's watching Shawshank Redemption in the living room, and it's the part of the movie where the guys are sitting on the inside of the walls of the prison saying, you either get busy living or you get busy dying. And I wanted to scream in the living room, turn that crap off, will you? I don't want to hear that. I thought, well, he's a 12-year-old boy. He doesn't know what's going on. And the next day, part of my recovery was walking. And the next day, I felt good. I couldn't believe it. I felt good. I thought, you're supposed to be down. You're supposed to be upset. This man doesn't come home till 2009. And it hit me. Who says I'm supposed to be unhappy? I didn't commit the crime. He committed the crime. And I started to realize that the level of acceptance that I had was a lot deeper than what I thought, that I could be happy regardless of what happens. I don't ever want to put conditions on my happiness, because then you cut off God's help. People talk about the 10th step in AA. I'll talk about the 10th step in such a way, and I'm going to shut up. It's been my hour. Last year, I was trying to teach Bob how to use the weed eater. Bob can't chew gum and walk at the same time. Good kid, totally uncoordinated, forgets to put umbrellas up, straight A's in school, but he don't know if it's day or night. He just don't. And I'm going to do my fatherly duty and teach the boy how to use a weed eater. Come here, Bob. Says you just tilt it down like that, and put it up against the building. You see a little pattern, you start walking with it. You got that? I says you pick it up and you just tilt it like that. Can you do that? He says, yeah. So I gave him the weed eater, and he goes, I said, let me explain this to you one more time. Give me that weed eater. I said, you grab it and you tilt it up like that. You think you can do that? He says, yeah. Give it back to him. He goes, I said, give me the goddamn weed eater. Oh. And by this time, he's starting to get a tear coming down his cheek. I was sober 17 years last year. I says, I'm going to show you one more time. And I'll be damned if he didn't do the exact same thing. I says, how can somebody be so intelligent and be such a blockhead? I don't know, Dad, but I don't work good under pressure. I said, God damn it, neither do I. If you just listen. Jesus. Then I realized, you're losing it over a weed eater, Joe. You are losing it over a weed eater. I thought, I'm going to go over here and sit down and drink a Coke and calm down. I said, God, you're going to have to help me with this one. And I looked at the weed eater, and I thought, you know what? Nobody's ever used that weed eater but me. Maybe if I adjust the handle up about a foot. I said, Bob, I've got an idea. He goes, oh, no, Dad. No. I said, no, wait, come here. And I moved the weed eater handle up about a foot. And I says, now here, try it. And he went, I went, oh, my God. I said, son, I'm so sorry. I said, did I make a complete fool out of myself? I'd give him a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. I says, I guess I was so concerned with trying to get you to see my point that it just frustrated me to no end that you couldn't see it. I says, I'm so sorry. And he's still crying. He said, that's okay, Dad, but I guess that means you're the blockhead, right? I says, yeah, I guess you're right, Bob. I'm wrong. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter how long a person's sober. Oh yeah, it gives me the opportunity to make more mistakes, put my foot in my mouth a little bit more. But I've become convinced of this, that if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous in your first 90 days of sobriety, we really don't care where you've come from. We don't care who you've done it with. We don't care how you've got here. But if you've heard anything at all this past hour, please remember this, that there was a drunk from Cincinnati that told you that you were wanted, needed, loved, and respected in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that if you want to stay sober more than anything in the world, you've always got a seat with us. If they let me in, they'll let anybody in. Thank you very much.